At the small regional auction yard outside the town, a row of old, rusted trucks stood under the morning sun. Most people walked past them without a second glance, treating them like scrap waiting for demolition. But one truck caught attention of a quiet man standing near the fence. Across from him, the international dealer laughed loudly, shaking his head as if he had seen something ridiculous. "That truck," he said, "isn't worth fixing. It's only worth scrap metal." The crowd around him laughed too, as if the verdict had already been decided. Paint was peeling, tires were flat, and rust covered almost every inch of the body. Nobody in that yard believed anything valuable could ever come out of it. The man walked slowly around the truck, not reacting to the laughter behind him. He checked the frame, the engine bay, and finally paused near the firewall as if something felt different. The dealer noticed and laughed again, saying, "You really think that thing has a future?" Without answering, the man raised his hand and placed a bid of $350. For a moment, the entire yard went silent, then the laughter returned even louder. The dealer shook his head, calling it the worst purchase he had ever seen. But the man simply paid, took the keys, and started walking toward the old truck. Everyone expected it to fail before it even moved. Still, he climbed into the cab without hesitation, ignoring the stares from the crowd. The engine struggled at first, coughing like it had not been alive in years. But slowly it turned over, and the truck roared weakly back to life. The laughter faded for a moment, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. The man adjusted the gear, looked one last time at the dealer, and drove out of the auction yard. The truck rattled down the road, leaving behind a cloud of dust and laughter. Even as the truck disappeared down the road, people at the yard kept talking about the foolish purchase. Some joked about it, others forgot it within minutes. But the dealer kept staring at the empty space where the truck had been, convinced he had just watched a mistake drive away. He could not understand why something that looked worthless did not feel like failure to him at all. The crowd saw junk. The buyer saw something entirely different. His name was Walter Hayes, a farmer mechanic who had spent most of his life fixing things other people abandoned. While many men in town chased newer equipment every few years, Walter followed a different path. He believed that usefulness mattered more than appearance, and that patience could often accomplish what money could not. Neighbors knew him as a quiet worker who spoke little, complained less, and always seemed to have grease on his hands. If an old tractor stopped running, Walter would look at it. If a worn machine was headed for the scrapyard, Walter would ask questions before anyone hauled it away. Over the years, he earned a reputation for bringing forgotten equipment back to life. Barns across the county held machines that had returned to work because Walter refused to give up on them. He never claimed to be a genius. He simply paid attention. Where others saw rust, he looked for strength. Where others saw damage, he looked for possibilities. That mindset saved him money and often solved problems that expensive replacements could not. His farm was not the biggest in the area, and he was not the wealthiest man around. In fact, many people considered him old-fashioned. Walter did not mind. He repaired his own tools, maintained his own equipment, and avoided debt whenever possible. Every dollar had a purpose, and wasting money on appearances never interested him. The same people who laughed at his habits often found themselves struggling with costly repairs or monthly payments. Walter quietly kept working. That was why the truck at the auction caught his attention. He was not impressed by its faded paint or broken parts. He was interested in what remained underneath. Years of experience had taught him that machines often revealed their true value only after someone took the time to understand them. The dealer saw a rusted truck nearing the end of its story. Walter saw a machine that had not yet been given a fair chance. Driving home that day, he ignored every joke and every prediction of failure. The truck rattled, shook, and groaned with every mile, but Walter listened carefully, almost as if it were trying to tell him something. He could not have known how important that purchase would become, or how many years the truck would remain beside him. For now, he focused only on giving it another chance to work again. The closer Walter looked at the truck, the easier it became to understand why nobody wanted it. Rust had spread across the body like a slow-moving disease. Several panels were weakened, and years of weather had left scars on nearly every surface. The interior looked even worse. The seat was torn, the floor showed signs of corrosion, and the dashboard carried the marks of decades of neglect. Nothing about the truck suggested reliability. To most people, it looked like a machine that had already reached the end of its useful life. The engine created even more doubts. It started hard, consumed oil, and produced sounds that would have convinced many owners to replace it immediately. Every trip seemed to reveal another small problem. A leaking seal here. A worn hose there. Some weeks Walter spent more time repairing the truck than driving it. Yet he kept working through each issue one step at a time. Friends stopped by the farm and questioned the decision. They reminded him that newer trucks were faster, cleaner, and easier to maintain. Some even suggested selling the truck before it became a complete loss. Whenever Walter crossed paths with the international dealer, the criticism continued. The dealer never missed an opportunity to remind him that $350 had been wasted on scrap metal. According to him, value came from price. Expensive equipment deserved respect because it cost more. Walter saw things differently. He believed value came from usefulness. A machine that worked every day was worth more than one that spent its life sitting in a showroom. He cared less about appearances and more about results. Still, the pressure was real. Every breakdown gave critics another reason to laugh. Every repair became evidence for people who wanted to prove the dealer right. If the truck finally failed, the story would be simple. The dealer had been correct all along, and Walter had ignored common sense. The old truck carried more than grain and supplies. It carried Walter's reputation. With every mile, the argument between appearance and usefulness continued. Most people expected that argument to end in failure. But time has a way of revealing truths that first impressions often miss. For years, the old truck quietly worked while newer trucks came and went. What began as a purchase everyone mocked slowly became one of the most dependable machines on Walter's farm. Year after year, the old truck hauled grain from the fields, delivered feed to livestock, and carried supplies between neighboring towns. It was never the fastest vehicle on the road, and it certainly was not the prettiest, but it showed up whenever work needed to be done. While others admired shiny paint and modern features, Walter cared about something simpler. He cared about whether a machine could be trusted. The truck still needed attention from time to time. A water pump failed one summer. A fuel line cracked during a harsh winter. Brakes wore out after thousands of miles on country roads. Whenever a problem appeared, Walter repaired it himself. He spent evenings in the barn with tools scattered across a workbench, fixing one issue at a time. He never rushed. He never complained. He simply treated every repair as part of the responsibility that came with ownership. Meanwhile, many of the expensive trucks that had impressed everyone at the auction began disappearing. Some suffered costly mechanical failures. Others were traded for newer models before their loans were even paid off. Each year brought another replacement, another upgrade, another promise of something better. Yet Walter's old truck remained. It continued starting on cold mornings. It continued hauling heavy loads. It continued earning its place on the farm. Gradually, people noticed. The laughter faded. The jokes became less frequent. Neighbors who once questioned the purchase started nodding with quiet respect whenever the truck rolled past. What had once been considered scrap was becoming something else entirely. For Walter and his family, the truck became more than equipment. His children learned to drive sitting behind its worn steering wheel. Family memories gathered around it. Harvest seasons, long workdays, and countless miles became part of its story. The truck had earned a place not only on the farm but also within the family itself. Yet one detail remained unknown to everyone. Hidden behind the firewall was something untouched since the day the truck left the factory. Through years of work, repairs, and inspections, nobody had discovered it. The secret remained silent, waiting through every season and every mile. Then, 17 years after the auction, a routine repair changes everything. 17 years had passed since Walter drove the truck out of the auction yard. During those years, he had repaired almost every part of it at least once. The engine had been serviced, the brakes rebuilt, and sections of the body restored whenever rust became too aggressive. By that point, Walter knew the truck better than anyone. Or at least he thought he did. One autumn afternoon, while preparing the truck for another harvest season, he noticed a patch of rust spreading along the firewall inside the cab. It was not unusual for an old truck to develop corrosion in hidden places, so he decided to address the problem before it became worse. He removed the worn interior panels one by one, expecting to find nothing more than rusted metal that needed cleaning and repair. As the panels came away, something unusual caught his attention. Behind a section of the firewall sat a small metal compartment that did not appear in any service manual he had ever seen. At first, he assumed it was part of an old modification made by a previous owner. But the more closely he examined it, the stranger it seemed. The compartment had been carefully sealed and positioned where nobody would accidentally discover it during normal maintenance. Walter paused and studied it for several minutes. The metal showed signs of age, suggesting it had remained untouched for decades. Dust had collected around the edges, and layers of grime covered the surface. Whatever was inside had likely been hidden there long before he bought the truck. Perhaps long before it even arrived at the auction. Curiosity slowly replaced caution. He retrieved a few tools and carefully worked around the edges of the compartment. Years of dirt and corrosion resisted every movement. Finally, after patient effort, the seal began to loosen. Walter's heart beat faster than he expected. He had spent 17 years with this truck, yet suddenly it felt like he was looking at a machine he had never truly known. Nobody knew what had been hidden there for decades. Not Walter, not his family, not the dealer who mocked the purchase. As the compartment finally opened, the answer that had waited silently for years was about to reveal itself. What he found explained the truck's entire history. Inside the compartment, Walter discovered a collection of items wrapped carefully in aging oilcloth. The first bundle contained photographs, their edges yellowed by time but still clear enough to reveal the truck in its earliest years. As he examined them, he noticed something remarkable. The truck had once belonged to a man whose name was well known throughout the region's transportation industry. Decades earlier, he had been considered one of the pioneers who helped build important freight routes across several states. Beneath the photographs were original registration papers, maintenance records, handwritten notes, and personal documents connected to the truck's first owner. The records told a story far larger than Walter had imagined. This ordinary-looking truck had played a role in transporting supplies through difficult routes during years when reliable freight service was still developing. What appeared to be a forgotten work truck was actually a surviving piece of local transportation history. The discovery quickly attracted attention. Walter shared the documents with a local historian who confirmed their authenticity. Soon, collectors began contacting him, eager to learn more about the truck. Some offered to purchase it immediately. Others simply wanted to see the vehicle that had quietly carried such an important history for so many years. News of the discovery spread rapidly throughout the community. The local newspaper published a feature story detailing the truck's background and the remarkable find hidden inside the firewall. People who had ignored the truck for years suddenly wanted to see it up close. Residents who remembered the trucking pioneer shared stories, adding even more significance to the discovery. Among those hearing the news was the international dealer from the auction. When he learned what had been found, he could hardly believe it. The same truck he had mocked as worthless scrap had become one of the most talked about vehicles in the county. For years he had judged it by appearance alone. Now the evidence stood in front of him, impossible to dismiss. The town saw the truck differently as well. It was no longer viewed as an old machine that somehow survived. It had become a symbol of hidden value and forgotten history. Yet despite the attention, the offers, and the recognition, Walter understood something important. But the discovery wasn't the most valuable part of the story. As attention around the truck continued to grow, people often asked Walter the same question. Why did you buy it in the first place? Most expected him to talk about the hidden documents or the truck's newly discovered historical value. Some assumed he had recognized a secret opportunity that nobody else could see. Walter always smiled at those suggestions because the truth was much simpler. He never bought the truck for profit. He never expected collectors to become interested. He certainly never imagined that a hidden compartment would transform an old work truck into a local story people would discuss for years. On the day of the auction, he saw nothing more than a machine that still had useful life left in it. While others focused on rust, damage, and appearance, he focused on possibility. That difference shaped everything that followed. The discovery inside the firewall did not change Walter's beliefs. It simply confirmed them. For 17 years, the truck had already proven its worth through honest work. It hauled grain, carried supplies, and helped support a family. The documents hidden inside gave the truck historical importance, but its real value had been visible all along to anyone willing to look beyond the surface. Over time, the story became part of local history. The truck appeared at community events and agricultural gatherings. Older residents shared the story with newcomers, and younger generations listened with curiosity. Parents told their children about the auction where everyone laughed and the years that followed. The truck became more than a vehicle. It became a reminder that first impressions are often incomplete. Even the dealer eventually admitted he had been wrong. Not because the truck turned out to be valuable, but because he had mistaken appearance for truth. That lesson stayed with many people long after the excitement faded. The world often judges value by appearance. The wisest people judge value by potential. Sometimes the things that look ordinary hold extraordinary stories. Sometimes the opportunities everyone ignores become the opportunities everyone wishes they had seen. And sometimes the things everyone laughs at become the very things everyone remembers. The old truck proved that lesson with every mile it traveled, leaving behind a legacy far greater than anyone at that auction could have imagined.